Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 35 of the Office Hours podcast. In this episode, we talked about what would I have changed, the three things that would have changed in my professional development in my previous careers and things of that nature. It was actually a question from one of our viewers, and we appreciate it very much. So I hope you're going to enjoy what's about to follow. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode 35 of the Office Hours podcast. Mo is back with us today, and let's see what we're gonna get up to. Hey, Mo.
Okay, so today I think we we prepared some some questions that
Mm-hmm.
you had gotten from some of the people that you know.
Right, right,
So,
right.
and then I was looking through these questions as well, and then I found some of them interesting, and I wanted to discuss them with you today.
Okay, sounds good.
And actually, one of the questions were if you were to look back and at your career, what are three things you would change or approach differently?
Okay,
This is pretty
interesting.
interesting, and I think we talked about it
Yeah,
too many times or a few times. Let me not say many,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Whose question was it? Can you remind me just so we can attribute them back? Just the name, I guess.
Oh yeah, you want a name?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
This is Abdul.
Abdul. Okay, okay. So Abdul is my colleague at Loblaw. So hi, Abdul. Okay, so for the question, like, what would you
Mhm.
like? What three things would you have changed? That's a really good question. I think one we kind of covered. We kind of covered in the previous one, or maybe two ones. See the for me it's kind of weird because like I have one episode that I'm still cutting and I haven't
Mhm.
released. But then the previous one that's actually so for some of them it'll actually be 2 episodes ago. So when I say previous, I probably refer to the two episodes ago, the one that's currently already posted. The one where we talked about negotiating salaries and knowing when to quit. So I think the biggest thing would be is that for some of the places, maybe it should have been make the switch sooner. Don't wait it out until the circumstances make you make that decision. Because, how I was saying, like, oh, it's kind of nice here. I kind of enjoy it. It's not too taxing. I'm not getting paid as much, but I have like all of these things that I can do. So it's okay for me to stick around here for longer. And I think that type of thinking wasn't really benefiting me in the long term because if I were to make that switch sooner, I probably could have gotten better deal. And by now, instead of making X amount of money, I would probably making 1.5x or 2x just to like kind of condense the timeline in switching and not wait, not be so complacent. I guess the main thing is like don't be so complacent about it. Like don't just
Mhm.
don't cope, and say, "Oh, I guess it's okay because I have this thing that I'm probably not gonna get elsewhere." It's not worth it, honestly. Like if the switch makes sense, then go for it. So that's kind of thing number one. Thing number two, I don't know specifically. We kind of talked about it again some episodes ago, and it was maybe like I went into whole web thing because I guess at the time it was sort of the beginning of web. Like in those days, most websites like still look like ass, and the technology was very very rudimentary. So the web was this whole new frontier, kind of like the Web 2.0 days, where a lot of the stuff started migrating to the client side, and that one is it's definitely a hindsight 2020 type thing because nobody knew where we'll end up with this. But maybe if I've stuck with more quote unquote serious languages, um, I might have gotten to a different heights in terms of my technical ability. Um, and then the third, what would the third be? I had like one. I remember recently one time where I was actually offered a promotion and a change in title from like intermediate to senior or something like that. And I said, nah, I don't really want it because it involves more meetings and like doing more tasks that I don't want to do. Now I look back at it, it's like, dude, why would you do this? Like your manager comes to
Mhm.
you and it's like, hey, here's a promotion, and you just like, nah, I don't want it. So back then, I guess back then, in those circumstances, it feels like it kind of made sense. But now I look at it, it's like, what the hell was I thinking? I should have taken it. It would have been like a pay bump, an expansion of responsibilities, and a chance to learn new skills. And it was kind of funny because I was all about learning new skills, but that change implied learning new skills in a not in a technical side of things, but more in like people and managerial side of things, and I just was not interested in that. So it I guess it did make sense at the time, but at least I should have taken it for a bigger paycheck. So that was pretty silly.
You know what? I totally agree with you. Yeah. Honestly, this, but again, first I was thinking like, imagine if Abdul hears this and
Hmm.
he decides to make the change next week, put in
Yeah,
his 2 weeks notice and like leave Loblaws. So, because the change makes sense, but this is just a joke. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think indeed like if the change makes, because most times we get like a bit sentimental, like we discussed, like
hmm, yeah,
you
yeah,
get a bit sentimental about like where you work and like things around you, and you feel like maybe you may not have this opportunity outside. It's like a relationship,
that's
so
right.
maybe it's gonna be better. You never know. But
Well, you
what's
have
the
to you
harm
have
in trying?
to yeah, you have to be able to act in your interest. And so
Hmm.
if it is in your interest to put in your 2 week notice to get better outcome. The thing is, some people they create this atmosphere of indispensability. It's like, oh, without me, the whole thing is gonna go to shit. Yeah, probably it might for a little while, but I don't know. It's kind of humbling, but like you're not as important as you think you are. The life will go on in your
For
absence,
sure, for
right?
sure,
So sure,
for
there
sure.
will be hiccups. People will
Hmm.
have to scramble, but ultimately, unless it's in such dire straits to begin with that your departure just ruins everything, sure, I guess that could happen. Like, I don't know, maybe if Elon Musk leaves SpaceX or Tesla, things will just fall apart without him tying all of the ends together. But if you're just a senior dev on a team among 25 other teams in a company of a couple of hundred people, don't flatter yourself. Your departure is not going to change that much. So if your
Mm.
departure, you
But
can make things considerably better for yourself, I think you should do it. We're not in, like, arguably we are in this, we're selling our expertise for money, and if you can get a better deal, you should get a better deal. There's no reason not to, because again, it's not going to be reciprocated. That type of loyalty is not going to be reciprocated. So don't do it. It just doesn't make sense.
yeah, you know, for sure I agree with you, yeah. But I just want to share a little bit of my own personal
Sure. What what
um
what are your
eh,
three things?
no, well, I have the same, kind of like the same, but I want to share my
Mm.
personal experience on the change thing.
Hmm.
Recently, I think maybe before 2 years ago, I used to feel like, I would prefer to just like move as soon as I feel the itch, like just make the change. And I think I moved around a lot, I
Mm.
would say quite frequently, but in the last few years, I've learned that I think if you're looking for, I want to know your opinion too. So like, I
Mm.
think if you're looking for like a experience, a real experience, like on the job experience, not just technical experience. I feel spending quite some time in one place can give you a better chance of accumulating this experience. So I'm not saying like 10 years of staying in one place. If this is what you enjoy, like for sure, but I think you would also gain some because I feel every scenario, every situation that happens on the job is a challenge, and you being able to um men cope with this challenge gives you some form of knowledge, some form of whatever it is, like even if it's like a shitty boss or like some different scenarios, like you learn something from it. And but I also know sometimes it's unbearable and sometimes it's not even worth it. But honestly, I'm a bit torn, like in knowing that break point because I know like if you move, say you give yourself like a year and a half in every position, for sure, you can always negotiate like maybe higher pay in any place you move to, especially if like the pay is what you really care about. For sure, you would for sure make it. But I think if you are looking to build like some real experience, like I think you need time in different places to actually learn something. I don't know if you will learn a lot within a year because if you work within let's say in an environment where you work on like contracts or like you have different contracts that take like certain type of durations to finish 3 months, 4 months contract, 6 months contract. And after that contract, you have like the downtime and like you pick up another contract. Depending on how the company works, I'm not very convinced that 1 year is enough to learn a lot. I think you will learn as much as you are exposed to, but maybe within 3 years, I don't know. Two. It depends also on personalities and like your own uh, the amount of effort you're also putting into it outside of work to get because outside of the 8 hours that you put into something, I think your own personal development should also have some time scheduled for it in especially in the beginning, I think. Because for me, I think sometimes like I spend some time working on different tools. Like at one time I was working like C sharp for some time, and then I moved somewhere else. I was working like Python, and then I moved somewhere else. All this kind of things. So like I feel like of course they give you knowledge on different stacks, on different tools, on like different experiences, on like different projects. But then again, like I don't think it will be those experiences will be as strong as people who stayed in those places for like 5 years, 3 years, or thereabout. I think you would really learn a lot about these things within this time, if learning it. And I also know that you get to a point in your career, experience is not really what you're looking for anymore. It's more like um, the compensation, like the benefit for the experience that you already have. So maybe at this point, yes, the the change might be easy to decide at this point. So I'm a bit torn about it, really.
Yeah,
So yeah.
it's an interesting thing. There's like a couple of ideas that I had when you were talking
Yeah.
about it. It's like originally you said that, oh, any small thing and I feel like I should just bail out, right? And I remember there's this horrible place on the internet called the /r relationships subreddit where
Oh,
people
yeah.
discuss their relationships with like
Mhm.
romantic relationships. And
Yeah.
sometimes I would occasionally, when I was still using Reddit like a couple of years back, I would open it to just kind of have this morbid thrill. It's like any tiniest insignificant thing someone's significant other does, there's going to be like 75 comments saying, oh my God, this person is a monster. You should leave immediately. he,
Yeah.
sneezed and scratched his nose this morning, and everyone's like, oh my God, Jesus Christ, he's gonna murder you
How
tomorrow,
dare you?
bail, 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 It's like,
Yeah.
calm the hell down, like, so I think
Mm-hmm.
one thing there is you have to kind of go through and analyze, like, how salvageable is it? Like, can you actually, with effort, can you get to a point where it's no longer a problem? Is it worth the effort to getting it there? Like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you can't, maybe you can fix it, right? But the amount of effort it requires, like, what's the cost benefit analysis, right? You have to gonna spend all of this effort, doing it. Is it gonna be worthwhile? So I agree that bailing at the first sign of trouble is not a good strategy either, because first of all, well, you grow through trouble and adversity. So if you never experience that, you never grow ultimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have
For
to
sure.
overcome things for them to make an impact on your life. But if you just bail out every time, you're not going to learn anything. So that's not good. But there is some upper limit to how much you're willing to endure before, like, flipping the table and being like, screw this, I'm out, right? And I think that that's kind of for everyone to determine their degree of, how much punishment are they willing to take. And again, that depends on your circumstances too. Maybe there's some times where you just don't have any other options and you kind of have to grit your teeth and stick with it, right? I mean, IT, I don't know. I've been talking to some friends yesterday, and there's like a couple of people who are sort of looking PM, PO roles, and they say, man, it's really bad out there right now. Like, LinkedIn shows you how many applicants applied for some posting, and that person said, like, oh yeah, I like sent in my resume, and then you refresh the page in a couple hours, it's like, oh yeah, 1,500 people applied for this job. And you're just like, what? So
Yeah.
in some cases, it might not be as easy to just make that switch anytime you want. So there's obviously that. But if you have an opportunity to, I guess I'm saying, like, if you have an opportunity to, that's where you should seriously consider actually going over everything you think is a positive and figuring out what are actually positives about staying and what are the positives, like the true positives about switching. The other thing that you mentioned, which I thought was pretty interesting, is that, and I tend to agree with it. So in terms of learning, it's easy to learn things when you don't know anything. It's kind of like acquiring experience in video game. When you're level 1, you need 10 experience points to get to level 2. But when you're level
Mm-hmm.
20, you need 25,000 experience points to get to level 21, right? So, like, doing the tasks that give you the same amount of experience at that level, you just have to do infinitely more of them, or you need to take on harder challenges, right? So you tend to progress very rapidly early on, and then it slowly starts plateauing because even the pool of challenges that you can draw from to learn these things shrinks, right? Because the more experience you get, there's going to be, if we're sticking with the video game metaphor, there's infinite amount of low level enemies, but bosses, they're few and far between. So if you really want to get that experience boost, you have to find those. So those opportunities may not present itself. And also, I think it's also true in terms of just things like neuroplasticity. It's much easier to learn things when you're like young. The amount
Mm-hmm.
of stuff you learn when you're like 5 versus 10, 15, 18, 20. Like, okay, I'm in my 40s now. I can still learn things, but it's much harder, just mentally. Um, it's just, plus, again, at this level, you don't want to learn trivial things either. So you need to, like, in order to get better, you need to learn more complex things. And more complex things are just harder to learn just by nature of being more complex. But also, it's just your brain is like, nah, man, we did all this learning back in the day. Can we just reap the fruit of our experience now and not have to learn anything new? So it's a
Mm-hmm.
struggle, right, with your own self in a sense. And at that time, I think you're right. It's like maybe earlier on, it is worthwhile sticking longer, being able to learn more. But as you progress, when it comes it switches from acquiring skills to applying skills. I guess it's kind of like, it's kind of like the mortgage payment. You have your principal and you have your interest, and they kind of like, you pay
Mm-hmm.
less and less interest and you pay more and more principal. Like those two curves, they kind of like,
Yeah.
so this thing here too, it's like as you acquire more experience, at first you don't have enough to apply it. Like you can apply whatever tiny amount of things you've learned, but then as you've acquired all of that experience, now you apply most of it, and you're not necessarily learning as much new things. And in this case, you just need to understand the business, and then you can apply your skills pretty much right away. So that transition time shortens too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. This is kind of the thoughts I had while you were
Yeah. I mean,
saying all of these things.
yeah, pretty valid actually. I think it kind of validates what I was thinking. So yeah. Also, you mentioned like in your top point, you said maybe if you had thing because when you started, like the web was just like picking up. But then again, I'm wondering if you feel like this now because I think the point you made was like maybe you should have focused more on like series development and instead of like choosing web. But then this, I think, in my opinion, I feel like maybe this might be a thing because of how web have seem to be right now, because of how web grew. It's like maybe someone who who is looking to be a software engineer now may not necessarily see web as like as a way to go. But then again, I'm curious. Like, I want to know why you feel this way. You know what? I'll start from there. Why you feel this way, so I don't assume. Because I was thinking like maybe it's because of how things have turned out is the reason why you think this way, or you genuinely just had like a lot of passion for it and you didn't go for your passion.
I'm not necessarily regretting the way the things have worked out, because it's a little bit kind of in jest, because I still enjoy what I do, and I've acquired a lot of experience in it. So, it just sometimes, maybe it's one of those grass is always greener type feelings, where you read some people's blog posts and articles, and they're doing like all this cool shit in Rust and Zig and all of these fancy languages, and you kind of start reading the source code and you're like, oh my god, I can barely understand what's going on, but they wrote it, so they're like, they have to be this much better than me. Like, what am I doing here at this level, right? So it's kind of this, you know comparing yourself to other people's highlights, right? Maybe there's like a little bit of that envy in a way. It's like, I could never do this, or maybe I could have done this, but I haven't gone this path, right? So
Hmm.
now it seems like what they're doing is way more advanced, which implies that their skill is higher. And it's sometimes when you look at it, it's like some 20-year-old kid is writing some, I don't know, crazy insane stuff with some of these languages, and you're just like, how come I never been that sophisticated?
Mm-hmm.
And you know you kind of have to look at it and analyze it and maybe understand that, because I think I talked about it before when I was talking about like martial arts and gymnastics and things like that, where you see these people who achieve these incredible results, and you compare yourself to them, and then it's just like, okay, but I've achieved incredible results in other areas, so that's okay. So maybe I have to look at these things through that same lens, but it's difficult because it's one thing when say, well, I'm great at web development and these guys are great at martial arts. Two completely unrelated domains, right? So whatever. But this is programming, and what I'm doing is programming, only their programming is way more intense and advanced compared to mine. I feel like I'm just like playing with sticks in my little sandbox, and they're like building skyscrapers, right? So it stings a
Yeah,
little bit more,
yeah,
when it's in the
I
same
understand.
domain as yours.
Yeah, I think I can understand this. Yeah, but does this like feel like FOMO in some way? Like you feel like you're missing out on the thrill that they're having on that side.
Kinda, yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
Because because the way I understood it earlier, I was gonna say like I think I think there will always be new roads or like new trajection trajectory
Trajectories?
or trajectories. Oh, pardon my English. So like I feel like there will always be new trajectories in software development generally.
Yeah.
Maybe before now, those were the things that were like really interesting to work on. And maybe nowadays, like I think a few years ago, everybody was really crazy about like Web3 and like, decentralized web or something like this. And so a lot of people actually invested in it. And I don't know if it's still as interesting as it was then times, especially with the whole things going on around that area now. But I also know like maybe people that might want to start out now might look into like other things. And 20 years from now, maybe they will also feel like they could have done something. I don't know. I just feel like there are trends. And I'm afraid like, is it wrong to build your own direction, your road based on the
No.
current
No, I don't think so.
developments, like the current trajectory
I
in
th-
the
I
in
think
the
like the
industry?
regrets is the worst thing you can possibly do to yourself, because it's not going to change anything. You're just going to feel shitty about your life choices. And
Yeah,
it's not like, okay, like if you made some really, really bad life choices, then maybe, okay, it's fair enough. You can regret those.
yeah,
But if you just made different life choices that aren't necessarily bad within themselves, but sometimes it's kind of funny. I was just thinking about it, like, uh, sometimes I look at like the stuff that SREs do, like deploying these crazy clusters, Kubernetes, like all these ingresses, and like I look at all of this and like I don't understand what's going on. And I kind of have this thing where it's like, wouldn't it be just much easier to just deploy things natively? Because it's like way less effort and it's just so easy. Like we used to do it 20 years ago and it worked perfectly fine. So why do we have to have like all this abstraction on top of it? And I'm starting to think like, is it real or is it just like a form of coping? It's like, fancy kids with their fancy Kubernetes clusters. Back in my day,
yeah,
we FTP PHP
exactly.
files onto the server and it was good enough
Hmm.
for us, right? So I think there's some validity to the fact that maybe it is over engineered like 90% of the time. Because like if you're Google, fair enough. Maybe at your scales, it totally makes sense.
Hmm.
But if you're building a to-do app in React, you don't need Kubernetes there, trust
For
me,
sure,
right?
for sure.
So it's a fine line to walk without like falling into either extreme. But yeah, regrets are pointless, and you can always change trajectories too. Maybe with a little bit more difficulty as time goes on, because you kind of get set in your ways. But the only thing that is ultimate and final in a sense is your casket some years down the line. Up until that happens, you can change your trajectory in your life to whatever you well then please.
Yeah, exactly. I, I think for me, if I'm to like have a different answer from what you had for this question, I think one thing I would do differently would be to have a better plan for the ambitions I have in my career. I
Yeah.
think I and this is one thing I would recommend to anyone. I didn't really learn a lot about like the importance of mentorship earlier in my career, and most of the things I was thinking about like in terms of my ambitions and like my plan, my career were mostly out of like the excitement I had like when I started working, like you were like, do this and I'm gonna do this and like in this, in this, in this, you know. So most of the reasons why I was moving around earlier was because of this. Like I was really just trying to do stuff that should take you, let's say, hypothetically 5 years within a few months, you know. So like you were really like so maybe, and I think some of the, it wasn't like a bad thing to do. It's just like you would have more, how do you say that? Like you will feel more relaxed in your journey and more comfortable in the journey if you have a navigate a GPS. And this is how I see it now. Like I
Yeah.
feel if I had like, again, I think I'm making 2 points in one now because first, like I would like to make better plans, but how am I doing that differently now? I feel like how I'm doing it differently now is because I learn a lot, not just from my own expectations or my own excitement, like, oh, like, do really what I want to do. I spend a lot of time talking with people with like a lot of experience, like, you know, like yourself, and people with like many years that have been through similar scenarios that I am now, and I kind of use them as my GPS, you know. And I think this really improved my view on my plans, on how I work, even on how I learn a lot of things. So I think honestly, I would recommend to anyone in any area of life or any area of like level right now the to leverage more on this GPS. Because an interesting thing is like I think when people talk about like mentorship, it always sounds like, oh, like you're a junior and like you're you're getting mentorship from like, you know, it has to be like senior people. But the thing is, I think mentorship is valuable in different level. Like you might be serial like senior, but there is still other people who have been in where you are right now who can still give you insights in how to do certain things and how to cope with certain scenarios and be better as a person, as a professionally as well. So I I think this is something that I would have really enjoyed sooner. Also, I think it also matters when you're talking to people, you know, like when you're like seeking experience or seeking knowledge from the GPSs or like the senior people or people who have past through experience before. I think it really matters in like how you listen to them and how you ask the questions also. Earlier, I would say I asked the questions like we were um classmates, you know, like in the sense like, oh, you're doing the same thing that I'm doing. So like I could just ask you to show me your homework kind of thing, you know. But but as I got more matured in the industry, I think I have come to respect a lot of these people, a lot of people like this, because I've come to see the the effort that was required to get through those stages, you know? And I value it more when they share their experience with me, like when we talk, for example. I value it more because you don't have to, you know? If you choose not to to share your experience, nobody's gonna hold you responsible. And I think when they do, I think it's like really out of a good place, you know, like it's a out of care. And also, you don't have to take it like verbally, like word for word, because everyone's journey is different also. And they might not be going in your direction. So maybe the direction where they're going may not be where you're trying to go. So you're not just like following the GPS to a wall, you know. So you have to also take it and add it to your vast of knowledge, like your knowledge database,
Hmm.
and use it to process your own
Yeah,
navigation
yeah.
really. So
I think,
these are things
yeah, yeah. I think like one thing that I kind of like, if I started thinking about it, one thing I kind of regret is not not talking more to my grandparents to kind of learn about their lives when they were
yeah.
younger, right? Because it has nothing to do with computers or IT. It's just
Yeah,
you have to be able to talk to people about their life experiences because they might have it gives you perspective on life too. Because like one of the things that you were saying, it's like you don't have a plan in at first, and many people don't have a plan for their life period. And for my pretty much my entire professional career, or at least 2/3 of it, I didn't have a plan. Thing just happened. It was very, very kind of reactive. It's like, oh, I went to the school, I did my classes, okay, and now some friends saying, hey, there's this guy who does IT, he wants to chat with you. Oh, I accidentally got hired. Okay, I'm working on this project, I'm working on that project. Oh, somebody wants you to do consulting. Okay, I'll go do consulting. So none of it was premeditated, right? Just kind of things just kind of happen, and I went along with it. And I only started being deliberate, or more deliberate rather, about my path much later than I rightfully should have. So maybe the number one on the list of things that I would have changed is actually, actually having a plan and being more deliberate about it instead of just
exactly.
floating, going with the flow, man.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's like going with the flow is fine, but uh it's kind of like a stick floating on the waves is gonna make it somewhere eventually, but a speedboat with a captain who knows where he's going is gonna get way
mhm,
further, way faster. So
for
if you just
sure.
go with the flow, you'll get some places. You're definitely gonna
Yeah.
get some places. But sometimes going with the flow, the tide can push you back to the shore where you started. So that's
Mm.
also not a good way of doing things. Like have a target and plan toward it and be deliberate. But I think that is very difficult for pretty much everybody. If everybody could do it, we'd all be Elon Musk, right? But there's only one Elon Musk, and people of that caliber, they're very few and far between who actually have that ability to like plan their life and stick to it. So you should try it, but I guess what I'm saying is like no one can guarantee any success because it really depends on how well you can do it and stick with it and actually understand what you want with from your life and how to get there, right? Because not everybody even knows what they want out of their life most of the time in
True.
a concrete sense. People may have some abstract notions like, oh yeah, I want to live in a better house, I want to, drive a nicer car and be paid more money, and I don't know, have a prettier wife, whatever. Nobody necessarily knows how to even get there, but and not having concrete goals. So
Yeah,
yeah,
true. True. I completely agree with you. And also, in the beginning, when you make these plans, I think it's also valuable to seek knowledge in those plans. For example, I was giving an example of my own self, like I was trying to fit in things that should. It's like you're trying to build a house and you want to build a whole mansion within within a few weeks, you know. You could, ideally, you could, people could, you can probably achieve this, but maybe the house will be stronger, or like the building will be stronger if you spend more time, giving it more time
yeah,
to develop, you know. I don't know if this is a good example, but I think it kind of explains what I'm trying to say. Anyway, yeah,
I think I know what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's it's something that I enjoy now, and I wish
If you're gonna,
and
yeah,
started using this sooner.
if you're gonna build a building, have a blueprint first.
Exactly. Yeah. Have a
Yeah.
blueprint
And yeah,
and like give it time. Yeah.